All right, this is a segment with Tara Dowdell and I guess a Republican strategist regarding Black Lives Matter and his opinion that the Black Lives Matter is a violent leftist group. I'm going to play the clip and make my comment at the end.
Joining me to talk about it is Democratic strategist Tara Dowdell and also Republican strategist and Newsday columnist Bill O'Reilly. Both of them are with me here on set. And also Rebecca Cinderbrand, Washington Post Deputy National Political Editor and Managing Editor of The Fix. And Rebecca, I want to start with you. And we heard from Jay Johnson of Meet the Press this morning and saying, first of all, bring it back, pull it back in when it comes to that political rhetoric. At this point, is that what's needed initially?
I mean, that's certainly what you're seeing a bit of right now. It was interesting to see on Friday, we saw almost an abrupt change of tone from Donald Trump. In past tragedies, we've seen him, for instance, after Orlando, kind of come out and make a political point after the tragedy. We saw him dial it back a bit, at least at first. Toward the end of the day, he eased into attacks on Hillary Clinton and the Democrats, but really focusing on mentioning the victims, which is something that he had not done in past events, by name of the police shootings. And so that's something that was very interesting to hear. Hillary Clinton, of course, also giving comments and mentioning specific policy solutions, which is something we have not yet necessarily heard from Donald Trump.
We were just talking about that, Bill, especially when you have Donald Trump in his office with a very scripted, obviously, message that he gave. And then today saying pretty much, and I'm paraphrasing here, kind of look where our country is today, thanks to Obama and crooked Hillary and all of that. So was that, should he have just left it with that post? And
yeah, he should have just left it. And I think what we're seeing is a pattern that plays out over and over again with Donald Trump is what likely happened after Dallas was that some of his aides sat on him physically or maybe put duct tape over his mouth and sent out some nice remarks at first. But Donald Trump seems to always come through in time, and he'll do that increasingly on Twitter. When he gets a chance to speak his mind, he tends to say things that are hurtful. And that's going to probably increase going into the convention. I think he did, or his campaign, I should say, handled the shooting well initially, but we'll see how long he can stay with that.
And Terry, what we've heard, everything was very measured. We saw the events, the campaign events being pulled back in light of this week and what happened. But there's also going to be that shift in tone when they get back on the campaign trail. And especially with the Democrats and Hillary Clinton, we're going to see her coming in. What is it that you think she will be saying and how she will handle this, given that Donald Trump has kind of laid it out in that sense?
Well, with respect to Donald Trump, though, I think that, he may have been measured initially, but he's not measured anymore. And some of his aides have not been measured. If you go on Twitter, they're saying some hateful things right now. But I will say this with respect to Hillary Clinton, certainly this is a challenging issue for her and for the Democratic Party. I think one thing that doesn't get talked about enough within Democratic Party politics is that our diversity of the party is our strength, but the diversity is also something that can create challenges because some of the interests are competing within the party. So I do think that this is a very a difficult thing for her to navigate. But I will say this. I think if she focuses on policy solutions, she focuses on real reform, that's a good thing. And I think also speaking to the fact that it should not be controversial for African Americans to expect to receive equal treatment under the law, under the Constitution. This should not be controversial. Black Lives Matter asking that unarmed black men and black women not be shot by police, 12-year-olds like Tamir Rice, Philando Castillo. These things should not be happening, and us demanding that it not happen should not be controversial, and the fact that it is says it all.
Well, we're all seeing the president when he came out and say from Poland that we are not as divided as some suggest, and then Donald Trump playing in on that initiative saying he must be living, and referring to the president, he must be living in a land of make-believe if we are not divided.
I think he's partially right in that, but that's no thanks to Black Lives Matter, and I think people need to understand that. Black Lives Matter is not some traditional civil rights movement, and don't buy me in
You're
that.
shaking your head.
No, look at the websites, look at their crazy demands that they've put out there. They belittled the tactics of the Martin Luther King civil rights activists. They're a group that likes to shut down.
They basically said different times call for different tactics. And if you look at their website, their campaign zero, a lot of the goals that they have as far as changing laws and having new laws put on the books, approximately 40 states have put on additional laws that they have suggested and supported. So I don't know what this guy's talking about.
Shout down. That's their tactics. They shut down classes. They shut down infrastructure. They're a very aggressive group.
Exercising their constitutional rights to protest in the United States of America.
But however, they're not supposed to shut down infrastructure and shout down people. They shouldn't do it.
Well, if I can interject, say from both members of Black Lives Matter that I spoke with today, say that their movement, that their mission, and that their message is that for peaceful reform. And you have the president even earlier this morning from Spain.
It's a leftist group.
Well,
if you go on, it's a leftist.
If I could just say from the president,
they acknowledge being a leftist group.
They don't acknowledge being a leftist group. They acknowledge being a group that stands up for the civil rights of black people. Now, if that's leftist, then, you know, that's what it is. But by definition, that's not leftist.
His words this morning, and he said, he praised them, and he said, when it comes to these protests, there are things that, and I'm paraphrasing, some things are said harsh, things that are overgeneralized, and you cannot basically make this generalization when it comes to...
Black Lives Matter tactics have always been confrontation. They've always pushed for confrontation.
Tara,
they pushed to shut down
it's pressure politics, because in this country, I worked in government. You do not, the squeaky wheel gets the oil in government. Anyone who tells you otherwise, they should not be quiet. They should not sit back. A 12-year-old was shot in Cleveland for playing with a toy gun. They should do whatever. You're more upset about them shutting down bridges. You should be upset about the 12-year-old that got shot playing with a toy gun. You should be upset about an unarmed black man who respectfully told the police officer who was...
If he is upset about any American that gets shot, then can he point to any group other than Black Lives Matter that came out in protest for Tamir Rice, John Crawford, etc.? So for him to say that he's upset about any American that gets shot, where's the evidence? I mean, he may individually be upset about it, but America, especially white America as a whole, haven't expressed any outrage, especially on that Tamir Rice murder. That is a classic case. And then even more classic, it was the John Crawford murder. So he's sprouting rhetoric here.
Respectfully told the police officer that he had a concealed carry permit, and that police officer shot him in front of his window. That's what you should be upset about.
I not have to break it and give Rebecca the last word. I wish we had more time, because again, this is on both sides and reflective of the argument of our community and our country and the passions that are running. Rebecca, to you very quickly, last word here. Is this reflective of not only our country and the divide here, but also the politics that we're seeing?
Well, there's two separate conversations. You heard, of course, there's the conversation over Black Lives Matter, specifically the movement, and that's something where you don't necessarily have a lot of common ground at the moment. And there's the conversation that you referenced, of course, about the violence itself, the violence between police officers and the way they're interacting with some in the community. And that's a conversation where you're hearing voices make a point and find a lot of common ground. You're hearing Newt Gingrich saying that some white Americans don't understand the plight of African Americans. And so we're starting to see an evolution in the conversation and more common ground than I think people expect.
All right,
all right, so that is what it is.